Thanks, and thanks to the Regional Independents for bringing forward this motion to discuss small and medium enterprises and the supports they need. And the first thing I want to do is advocate on behalf of 26,000 small enterprises who are the taxi drivers of this country. And they are very, very concerned at the moment about moves to deregulate the taxi industry, which are being spearheaded by some other small and medium enterprises who have a legitimate concern, don't get me wrong, those in the pub trade and those in restaurants, night entertainment and so on, who have teamed up with Uber and some of these other ride-hailing app people to argue that there's a chronic shortage of taxis and that effectively we need to introduce the Uber-type model for taxis where anybody can be a taxi driver, where there's complete deregulation. Now, the taxi drivers, 26,000 of them and their families, are very, very concerned, and I agree with them. That is not the way to go. That is not the way to go. First of all, huge numbers of those taxi drivers have invested large amounts of money in buying new taxis, often electric vehicles, and they have big loans with the banks. If there is wholesale deregulation of the taxi industry, that will seriously impact on their ability to make a living and therefore their ability to pay back loans that are very large loans in many cases on expensive new taxis. So we should not go down that road. We should also not, linked to that, lower the entry sort of requirements for going into the taxi industry. Why? Because when you get into a taxi, you need to know you're going to be safe. You need to know you're in a properly regulated taxi with somebody who knows the business, knows the area, and isn't just somebody who can put themselves on an Uber app with the potential danger that you don't really know who's driving you and so on. That is important. Now, why is this? Is it the case, and in fact, the taxi drivers would say that some of the figures being put out by Uber and some of the others about the chronic shortage of taxis are inaccurate. Free Now have very different figures, apparently, in terms of the availability of taxis, and it is certainly the case if you look at certain times of the day, you will see long lines of taxis waiting long periods of time to pick up a fare. The taxi drivers do admit there are pinch points. There are pinch points at particular times of the day or particularly at night. How do you address that? First of all, it is unfair to put the burden of solving that problem solely on the shoulders of taxi drivers. We need more public transport, frequent, more expanded public transport bus services at night, which can help the small businesses who depend on nighttime trade, but not put an excessive burden on taxi drivers to fill a gap in terms of late night transport. The other thing the taxi drivers will point out is their safety concerns. Many taxi drivers don't like driving at night because they're worried about their own personal safety. So it's up to the government to address those safety concerns, but deregulating the taxi industry is not the way forward. So critically, I would say the government, the NTA, anybody who is looking at this issue needs to engage with the taxi drivers, treat them with respect. The last time we had deregulation of the taxi industry, it was a total disaster for taxi drivers, and it should not happen again. Second group I want to advocate for are many of our actors, musicians, performers, dancers, writers, directors, of which there are tens of thousands, who help contribute to the culture of this country, to the music, things we often take for granted, but they are mostly
lone traders, sole traders, and they have a very, very precarious existence in terms of going from gig to gig, very poor income in many cases. Most of our artists and the people who contribute to the films that we see on television or music live in poverty and in very, very precarious circumstances. They need more support. I believe that the basic income for artists should be extended to all those who work in the arts, but also it is critically important that the government address the copyright issue in terms of intellectual property rights, royalties, in other words, for writers, directors, actors and so on who are being robbed of the royalties they should get for their performances when they get paid for making a television program or whatever, but then the producers run off with the royalties when when that same thing is distributed on Netflix or whatever it is. They're not getting paid. Right, they're not getting, and that is a breach of the copyright directive, and the use of buyout contracts being enforced on writers, directors and performers by producer companies has to stop. It's contrary to the copyright directive, it's contrary to the law, and it is an abuse and an exploitation of our writers, actors, performers, dancers, musicians and so on, composers and so on. So I ask the government to seriously look at that. I also would say generally there's some people who want to be, rightly, small business, lone traders and so on. There's other people who are wrongly classified as those things because it suits their employers not to give them proper jobs. And that is widespread in a whole number of industries and in the arts, again, another area where this is widespread. So I believe the department has to be, if you want to be a small business, fine. But if you are actually an employee, going in, clocking in 9 to 5 and so on, working for the same person again and again, even if it's episodic in a gig economy, you should be classified as an employee, so you get your holiday entitlements, sick pay, pension rights and so on and so forth. Last point, on the generality of small and medium enterprise. And I just want to repeat something. When small and enterprise come to me, their concern is rates. Right, is one of the big concerns. It is not fair that a small cafe pays the same rates per square metre of their business as a bank that's making billions in profits. We should have a differential scheme of rates based on revenue and profits, and not where the butcher, the baker and the candlestick maker are paying the same level of rates as huge chains and banks that are making enormous profits. Also, I believe we need a not-for-profit insurance company that actually provides for insurance that is actually affordable for small and medium enterprise. Lastly, we have to do something about massive rent increases for small businesses that can, at a stroke, often put them out of business.